When my daughter Margaret looked me dead in the eye at Thanksgiving dinner and said, "Stop begging for money." It's embarrassing, something inside me cracked like ice breaking on a frozen lake. I smiled sweetly, picked up my phone, and texted my bank, "Cancel all authorized user cards immediately." By morning, all three of my ungrateful children would realize their financial safety net had vanished, just as quickly as their respect for me. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from. But let me back up and explain how I, Eleanor Walsh, a 62-year-old retired high school English teacher from Ohio, ended up declaring war on my own children over mashed potatoes and stuffing. The whole mess started when I asked Margaret to pay back the $15,000 I'd loaned her 8 months earlier for her kitchen renovation. I didn't demand it, just asked politely, the same way you'd ask someone to pass the salt. "Mom, we talked about this," Margaret said, not even looking up from cutting her turkey. "That was a gift, remember?" A gift. Apparently, $15,000 was now considered a gift, just like the $8,000 I'd given David for his car down payment and the $12.00 I'd covered for Sarah's credit card debt. Funny how I didn't remember agreeing to give away $35,000 of my retirement savings as gifts. "Actually, honey, I have the text messages where you promised to pay it back by Christmas," I said, keeping my tone light. "I thought we could just talk about a payment plan." That's when Margaret dropped her fork and gave me that look, the one that said I was being unreasonable for wanting my own money back. "Mom, seriously, we're having Thanksgiving dinner. This is so inappropriate." David, my 34-year-old son who still couldn't manage his credit score, decided to chime in. "Yeah, Mom, it's kind of tacky to talk about money at family dinner." Tacky? It was tacky for me to mention the money they'd borrowed, but apparently not tacky for them to spend it on luxury vacations and designer handbags while I stretched my teacher's pension to make ends meet. Then Sarah, my youngest at 31, twisted the knife even deeper. "We all contribute to this family in different ways. Just because you have savings doesn't mean you should keep track of every penny like some loan shark." My savings? As if my retirement fund were pocket change I'd found in the couch cushions, instead of the result of for decades spent grading papers until midnight and saving every dollar I could. But it was Margaret's next words that sealed their fate. "Honestly, Mom, stop begging for money. It's embarrassing. We're your children, not your debtors." The entire table went silent. Even the grandkids stopped chattering. My son-in-law, Mark, looked uncomfortable, and Sarah's boyfriend, Tommy, stared down at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. I sat there for a moment, letting those words sink in. Begging, according to my daughter. Asking for my own money back was begging. "You're absolutely right, sweetheart," I said, standing up with my phone in hand. "I should stop begging." That's when I sent the text to my bank and another to my credit card company, and one more to my investment advisor. The beautiful thing about being the primary account holder is that you have all the power. Those authorized user cards I'd set up for emergencies? Gone. The joint checking account I'd opened with David for his business expenses? Frozen. The credit line I'd co-signed for Sarah's apartment? Terminated. I finished my dinner in silence while my children chatted about Black Friday sales and holiday plans, completely oblivious to the financial earthquake I'd just triggered. They had no idea their credit cards would start declining in about 6 hours when the bank systems updated overnight. But I knew, and for the first time in months, I was smiling a real smile. How did I become the family ATM? It happened gradually after my husband, Tom, died 3 years ago, starting with one phone call that seemed so innocent at the time. "Mom, I need help." Margaret's voice had been tearful, desperate. It was January 2022, just 2 months after Tom's funeral. Her husband, Mark, had taken a pay cut at work, and with 2 kids and a mortgage, things had gotten tight. What widow wouldn't help her struggling daughter? I wrote that first check for $3,000 without hesitation. It was supposed to be temporary, just until they adjusted to the reduced income. Margaret promised to pay me back in 6 months after Mark's performance review. 6 months passed. No mention of repayment, but plenty of mentions of other problems that needed financial solutions. Instead, Margaret called again. The kids needed school supplies and new clothes, and money was tight. Could I help with $500? Of course I could. I was their mother, and they were still grieving their father, too. Then David's car broke down. Then Sarah needed help with her moving expenses. Each time, they promised they'd pay me back when things stabilized. Things apparently never stabilized, but their requests certainly got bigger. By early 2024, I was practically funding their entire lifestyle: Margaret's kitchen renovation, David's investment opportunity that turned out to be a cryptocurrency scam, and Sarah's credit card bills from shopping sprees I couldn't afford for myself. The irony? While I was emptying my savings to keep them afloat, I was eating generic soup for dinner and wearing the same cardigans I'd owned for a decade. My own children thought I was wealthy because I helped them, but the truth was, I was slowly draining my teachers' pension to subsidize their middle-class lifestyles. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself they'd remember my generosity when they got back on their feet. I told myself a lot of things that turned out to be complete nonsense. The wake-up call should have been David's birthday party last year. I gave him a check for $2,000 to help with his rent, and an hour later, I overheard him telling his girlfriend's parents that his rich mom always came through when he needed cash. Rich, the woman who hadn't bought herself new shoes in 2 years, was rich, according to her son, but I kept writing checks because that's what mothers do, right? We sacrifice for our children. We put their needs before our own. We give until it hurts and then give some more. What I didn't realize was that my children had stopped seeing me as a person with my own needs and started seeing me as a resource to be managed. I wasn't their mother anymore. I was their personal bank, and they'd gotten very comfortable making withdrawals without any intention of making deposits. Thanksgiving dinner was just the final straw. After 2 years of bleeding money and getting nothing but attitude in return, Margaret had the audacity to act like I was the problem for wanting my own money back. Well, I thought, as I watched my phone light up with frantic calls I had no intention of answering. They were about to learn exactly what kind of problem their mother could be. When she stopped being so accommodating. You want to know the real kick in the teeth? It wasn't just the money. It was everything I'd sacrificed for these kids over the years, only to be treated like I was inconveniencing them just by existing. Take Margaret's wedding in 2015. She wanted the perfect Pinterest wedding, but her budget was more Walmart than Nordstrom. So guess who stepped in? I used $12,000 from my teacher retirement fund to pay for the photographer, the flowers, and the open bar because my daughter deserved her dream day. The thank you card I received had my name spelled wrong. Eleanor, apparently that was too difficult to remember correctly. For David's college graduation in 2018, he needed professional attire for job interviews. So I bought him 3 complete outfits, an investment in his future, I called it. He wore those suits to land his current job, the one that pays him enough to afford his trendy apartment, but somehow never enough to pay back his mother and Sarah, sweet Sarah, who called me crying at 2 a.m. when her boyfriend dumped her, when she got fired from her retail job, when she needed someone to listen. I was always there, always ready to write a check or offer a shoulder to cry on. But when I mentioned at Easter that I was thinking about getting my furnace repaired, you know what Sarah said? Mom, you should really learn to budget better. It's not healthy to stress about money at your age. Budget better. The woman whose credit cards I'd paid off twice was giving me financial advice. The truth is, I'd become invisible to them except when they needed something. They'd show up for Sunday dinners with empty hands and full appetites, complaining about their problems while I served meals made from clearance groceries. Margaret would vent about her marriage troubles while I did her family's laundry for free. David would lecture me about politics while I helped him move apartments for the 4th time in 3 years. And Sarah would scroll through her phone while I babysat her cat every weekend. I was the unpaid therapist, babysitter, housekeeper, and bank call rolled into one convenient, mother-shaped package. But here's what really gets me. They genuinely believed they were doing me favors by spending time with me. Like I should be grateful that my successful, independent children even bothered to include their lonely old mother in their busy lives. Margaret actually said that to me once. Mom, we make an effort to visit you because we know you get lonely since Dad died. But you can't expect us to solve all your problems, my problems. Apparently, wanting my own money back was my problem, not their problem for taking it in the first place. The night after Thanksgiving, while my phone buzzed nonstop with their increasingly frantic calls, I sat alone in my quiet house and made a detailed list. Every loan, every gift, every favor I'd done for them since Tom died 3 years ago. The total came to just over $53. Zero in cash plus countless hours of free labor and emotional support. $53,000 I'd never see again, given to children who thought asking for it back was embarrassing. Well, they hadn't seen embarrassing yet, but they were about to learn what real embarrassment looked like. My phone started ringing at 6:47 a.m. on Black Friday. Margaret's name flashed on the screen, but I was busy drinking my coffee and reading the newspaper like any other normal Friday morning. Why rush to answer? I had nowhere to be and all the time in the world. By 7:30, I had 15 missed calls and a string of text messages that would have been hilarious if they weren't so pathetically predictable. Mom, my card was declined at Target. There must be some mistake. Mom, call me. Something's wrong with the bank. Mom, answer your phone. This is urgent. I finished my crossword puzzle and started on the Sudoku before I even looked at the messages. Then David started to panic. Mom, what the hell? My card doesn't work and the joint account is frozen. Did you do something? Such a bright boy, my David. Only took him 4 hours to figure out that mommy wasn't playing anymore. Sarah's message was my personal favorite. Mom, this is really mature. Are you seriously going to ruin our credit over a family disagreement? A family disagreement? That's what we were calling systematic financial exploitation now? Apparently so. I made myself a nice breakfast: scrambled eggs with cheese, fresh fruit, and real orange juice instead of the powdered mix I'd been buying to save money. Might as well enjoy the luxury of a peaceful morning before the storm really hit. At 10:15, Margaret finally showed up at my front door. I saw her through the peephole, pacing on my porch like a caged animal. Her face was red and she kept checking her phone every 5 seconds. I opened the door wearing my most innocent smile. Good morning, sweetheart. You're up early for a holiday, Mom. What did you do? Her voice was tight, like she was trying very hard not to scream. I had breakfast, I said calmly. Eggs were perfect. Would you like some coffee? This isn't funny. Our cards aren't working. Mark had to abandon his shopping cart at the grocery store. The kids are asking why Daddy can't buy their Christmas presents. Oh, the children. Of course, she'd bring up the children. Have you tried paying with your own money? Margaret's jaw dropped. What do you mean our own money? You gave us access to those accounts. I gave you emergency access to my accounts for actual emergencies, not for funding your lifestyle while you ignore your debts to me. Her face went from red to white. Those were gifts, Mom, you said. I never said any such thing. I have every text message, every email, every written promise you made to pay me back. Would you like me to read them to you? That's when the tears started, big, dramatic tears. Just like when she was 7 and didn't get her way at the toy store. Mom, please. We can't afford groceries without those cards. The kids need clothes. Christmas is coming. Funny, I said. How you could afford a weekend trip to Chicago last month but can't afford groceries now. She had no answer for that because there wasn't one. I want you to leave, I said calmly. When you're ready to have an adult conversation about paying back the money you borrowed, you can call and schedule an appointment. Until then, stay off my property. You can't be serious. Try me. After she left, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a long, hot bath with those expensive bath salts I'd been saving for a special occasion. Then I painted my nails burgundy and ordered Thai takeout for dinner. It felt like Christmas morning and my birthday rolled into one. The family intervention was David's idea. He called Sunday evening, using his most reasonable voice, the one he'd perfected for explaining to his boss why he was late again. Mom, we need to sit down and work this out like adults. This had gone too far. I agreed to meet them at Margaret's house on Tuesday evening, not because I was ready to cave, but because I was curious to see what kind of strategy they'd cooked up over the long weekend. I arrived exactly on time, wearing my best navy dress and the pearl necklace Tom had given me for our 20th anniversary. If we were having a family meeting, then I was going to look like the dignified, successful woman I'd forgotten I could be. They were all there: Margaret and Mark, David and his girlfriend Jessica, Sarah and her current boyfriend, whose name I couldn't be bothered to remember. They'd arranged themselves around the living room like a tribunal, serious faces, folded hands. The air thick with self-importance. Margaret had clearly been elected spokesperson. Mom, we've been talking and we think you're having some kind of emotional breakdown. I nearly laughed out loud. An emotional breakdown because holding people accountable for their debts was now a symptom of mental instability. We're worried about you, David chimed in. This isn't like you. You've always been so generous and understanding. Understanding. Yes, I'd been very understanding while they picked my financial bones clean. Sarah leaned forward with her most sympathetic expression. Mom, we know Dad's death was hard on you. Maybe you should talk to someone. A grief counselor or therapist. There it was. The grief card. Because, of course, the only reason a woman would want her money back must be unresolved trauma, not basic common sense. You think I'm having a breakdown because I want you to honor your debts? I asked pleasantly. Mom, those weren't debts, Margaret said, exasperated. Family helps family. You helped us and someday we'll help you. When exactly will that magical someday arrive? I asked. Because I've been waiting 3 years for it to show up. Mark, bless his heart, tried to play mediator. Mrs. Walsh, maybe we could work out a payment plan. Something reasonable that works for everyone. You mean like the payment plan Margaret agreed to last spring? I said, the one where she was going to pay me $500 a month starting in June. Because unless my math is completely wrong, that means she currently owes me $3. 0 just in missed payments. The room went very quiet. Or maybe, I continued, we could follow David's plan where he was going to pay me back from his tax refund. That was 18 months ago. David, did you forget to file your taxes, or did you just forget about me? David's face was turning red. Mom, you're being accurate? I interrupted. Yes, I am being accurate. I turned to Sarah. Would you like to tell everyone about your plan to pay me back? From your promotion at the department store? Sarah's face crumpled. Mom, stop. The promotion you got 10 months ago, I said. The one you celebrated with a shopping spree you documented on Instagram for everyone to see. I stood up. Smoothing down my dress, here's my payment plan. You have 60 days to return every penny you borrowed, with a reasonable payment schedule we all agree to in writing. Or I consult a lawyer about my options. The silence that followed was deafening. You can't see your own children, Margaret whispered. I smiled at her. Watch me. Thursday morning brought the first sign that my children were finally taking me seriously. Sarah showed up at my house at 8 a.m. with an envelope full of cash to $100. Which she claimed was everything she had in her checking and savings accounts. Mom, please. She said. I'm trying to make this right. I looked down at the crumpled bills in my hand. Sarah owed me $12,000 and she thought $200 was going to fix this, sweetheart. This doesn't even cover 1 month of missed payments on what you owe me. It's all I have right now. She said quickly. But I can get more. I can pick up extra shifts at work. Maybe sell some things. The desperation in her voice should have moved me. 3 months ago, it would have. But that was before I learned exactly what my children really thought of me. Sarah, sit down. We need to talk. She perched on the edge of my couch like she was ready to bolt at any second. When you were 18, I said, you overdrew your checking account and came to me for help. Do you remember what I told you about managing money? Her face went pale. That borrowing money creates an obligation and obligations have to be honored. And what did I say about family and trust? That family relationships should be built on respect, not convenience. So explain to me, I said quietly, how borrowing money with no intention of paying it back shows respect for our relationship. Sarah started crying, then not the manipulative tears she'd perfected as a teenager, but real, ugly sobs. I didn't mean for it to happen this way, she said between gasps. I always planned to pay you back. But then other things came up. And it seemed like you didn't really need the money anyway because you kept offering to help. Because I kept offering to help, I repeated softly. You thought that meant you didn't have to pay me back. No. That's not I mean. She wiped her nose with her sleeve. Mom, I screwed up. I know I screwed up, Sarah said. Her voice cracking, but cutting us off completely isn't going to fix anything. That's when I told her what I'd discovered Tuesday afternoon. After finally going through 18 months of bank statements and credit card records that had been piling up on my desk, Sarah, I said quietly, you've been using my credit card for unauthorized purchases. Her face drained of color. The statements were going to my old P.O. box from when I had mail forwarding issues after your father died. So I didn't see them regularly. Sarah's complexion shifted from white to green. I was going to tell you when I cut in. When were you going to tell me that you've been using my card number for gas, restaurants, and online shopping for the past year? I needed those things, Mom. My job doesn't pay enough and rent keeps going up. So you decided to supplement your income by stealing from your mother? It wasn't stealing. I'm your daughter. My daughter, I said slowly, who took advantage of me during the most difficult period of my life. My daughter who borrowed money she never intended to repay. My daughter who thought I was too grief-stricken or too trusting to notice. I stood up and walked to my desk, pulling out the folder I'd prepared the night before. I've made an appointment to speak with a lawyer next week. Sarah, what you've done isn't just about family loans anymore. Using someone's credit card without permission is fraud even if you're their daughter. The color drained completely from her face. You're not going to press charges. You wouldn't. Try me. For the first time in her adult life, Sarah was completely speechless. Here's what's going to happen, I said evenly. You're going to pay me back every penny loans and unauthorized charges. You have 60 days to come up with a payment plan that I approve. Or I'm taking legal action. She left without another word, clutching the envelope of cash she'd brought like it was a life preserver. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Margaret. Mom, you can't threaten Sarah with jail. She's your baby. My baby, I said, is a 31-year-old woman who committed credit card fraud. And if she faces legal consequences, it won't be because I threatened her. It'll be because she chose to steal from her mother. That evening, David called. Mom, we need to end this, he said. It's destroying the family. No, David, I replied. You destroyed the family when you decided I was nothing more than a bank account with gray hair. I'm just refusing to pretend otherwise anymore. What do you want from us? I want what you took, I said. Every penny with a written payment schedule and real consequences for default. And if we can't afford that, then you should have thought about that before you stole from me. I hung up and made myself a cup of tea. Tomorrow, I had an appointment with my lawyer to discuss exactly what my options were. My children thought this was about money, but they were wrong. This was about respect, dignity, and teaching them that actions have consequences. And I was going to get every bit of what I was owed. 2 weeks later brought an unexpected visitor. My sister Linda, who lived in Michigan and hadn't called me since. Tom's funeral stood on my doorstep with the grim expression of someone delivering bad news to Eleanor. We need to talk. I let her in, though I already had a pretty good idea why she was here. Sure enough, she barely sat down before launching into her rehearsed speech. Margaret called me. She's worried about you. She says you're not acting like yourself, really, I said. And how exactly am I supposed to act when my children have systematically exploited me financially? Linda waved her hand dismissively. Oh, honey, it's not exploitation when it's family. You've always been generous with those kids. Why are you being so harsh now? It was fascinating, really. My children had called in reinforcements and of course, they'd chosen the one family member who'd always thought I was too soft on them. Linda, I said. Did Margaret mention that Sarah has been using my credit card without permission for over a year? She said there might have been some confusion about card access. Confusion? I repeated. That's what we're calling unauthorized use of someone's credit card now. Linda looked uncomfortable. Eleanor, you're blowing this out of proportion. These are your children. They love you, do they? I asked. Because people who love you don't usually steal from you and then call you embarrassing. When you ask for your money back, they're struggling financially, Linda said. Young people today face challenges we never had, Linda. Margaret drives a car that's newer than mine. David spent more on his last vacation than I spent on groceries in for months. These aren't struggling young people. These are adults who think their mother exists to subsidize their lifestyle. But Linda had already made up her mind before she even got here. I think you should forgive them and move on. Family is more important than money. You're right, I said softly. Family is more important than money. That's why I'm so hurt that my family chose money over treating me with basic respect. After Linda left, I picked up the phone and called the law office my friend Helen had recommended. I'd like to schedule a consultation, I said, to discuss my legal options regarding family financial disputes. January brought a series of increasingly desperate attempts by my children to manipulate me back into compliance. Margaret tried guilt. David tried logic. Sarah tried tears. None of it worked. What did work was my appointment with attorney Patricia Chen. Mrs. Walsh, she said after listening carefully. Based on what you've told me, you have several legal options. The unauthorized credit card use is definitely actionable. The loans, well, without formal documentation, that's more challenging but not impossible. What would you recommend? I asked. Start with a formal demand letter. Give them 90 days to respond with a payment plan. If they don't comply, we can discuss litigation. That afternoon, certified letters went out to all 3 of my children, official, legal, and absolutely terrifying. The response was immediate and predictable. Margaret called, sobbing. David showed up at my door, furious. Sarah sent a text calling me heartless. Not one of them, however, offered to pay me back. February brought the most interesting phone call I'd received in years. It was from Jonna Morrison, Tom's former business partner. Eleanor, I hope you don't mind me calling, she began. But I received a rather strange inquiry last month about Tom's old accounts. My blood went cold. What kind of inquiry? Your son David called, asking about business records and whether there were any assets that might have been overlooked. During the estate settlement, I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. What did you tell him? Well, I couldn't share specific details without proper authorization. Of course, she said. But I found it odd that he seemed focused on whether Tom had any separate business accounts or investments. Jonna, did Tom ever mention anything to you about accounts I didn't know about? There was a long pause. Eleanor, I probably shouldn't say this, but yes, Tom had a small business account for his consulting work. Nothing huge, maybe $20,000 or $30,000. He said he was saving it as a surprise for your retirement. My hand started to shake. Tom had kept money secret from me even if his intentions were good. And somehow, David knew about it. Did David have any legal right to that information? Absolutely not, Jonna said firmly. Which is why I didn't tell him anything specific. But Eleanor, if there is money out there, you should be the one to claim it, not your children. That afternoon, I drove straight to First National Bank with Tom's death certificate and our marriage license in hand. After 2 hours of paperwork and verification, the bank manager confirmed what I'd begun to suspect. Mrs. Walsh, he said, your husband did have a business account with us. The balance at the time of his death was $34,000. We've been trying to contact the estate for 3 years, but our letters were returned as undeliverable. They'd been sending notices to Tom's old office address, the one that had been closed since his Deaf Mrs. Walsh, the manager continued. I have to ask, has anyone else inquired about this account? My son David, I said. What exactly did he want to know? The manager looked uneasy. He claimed to be the executor of your husband's estate and asked about accessing the funds. When we requested documentation, he said he'd get back to us. That was 6 weeks ago. David had been trying to steal money that belonged to me, money I hadn't even known existed. What do I need to do to claim this account? I asked, since you're the surviving spouse and there's no will specifying otherwise. The funds belong to you. We just need you to complete some paperwork by Thursday. I had $34,000 deposited into my personal account money. My son had tried to steal while simultaneously borrowing from my pension that evening. I did something that felt better than anything I'd done in months. I called David. Hi, honey, I said sweetly. I had the most interesting conversation with the bank. Today, silence, they told me about your inquiry regarding your father's business account, the one you tried to access without authorization, Mom. I can explain, I'm sure you can, I said. Just like you explained why you needed to borrow $8,000 for a car when you were planning to steal $34,000 from your father's account. It wasn't stealing. I thought you could access money that legally belonged to me while simultaneously taking loans from my pension. That's not just stealing, David, that's systematic fraud. The phone went so quiet. I thought he'd hung up. Mom, please, he finally said. I wasn't trying to hurt you. No, I said calmly. You were just trying to rob me. There's a difference. I hung up and poured myself a glass of wine. Tomorrow, I was adding attempted bank fraud to my growing list of grievances against my son. March brought the meeting I'd been both dreading and anticipating in equal measure. My 3 children had finally agreed to sit down with me and attorney Patricia Chen to discuss a formal resolution. We met at Patricia's office on a gray Thursday afternoon. Margaret, David, and Sarah arrived with their own lawyer, a nervous young man named Rodriguez, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Patricia had come fully prepared. We're here to discuss Mrs. Walsh's claims against her 3 adult children for approximately $53,000 in unpaid loans, plus $2,400 in unauthorized credit card charges, and attempted fraud involving Mr. Walsh's business account across the table. Their lawyer, Rodriguez, shifted uncomfortably. My clients maintained that the money transfers were gifts, not loans. Patricia calmly slid a thick folder toward him. These are copies of text messages, emails, and handwritten notes where all 3 defendants clearly promised to repay what they borrowed. You'll also find bank records showing consistent patterns of requests and transfers. I watched as my children's faces fell while their lawyer flipped through the evidence. Margaret looked ill. David stared down at his hands. Sarah cried quietly into a tissue. Patricia continued, her tone steady. Furthermore, we have evidence that Mr. David Walsh attempted to access a bank account belonging to his deceased father without proper authorization. The bank has confirmed that Mrs. Walsh is the legal owner of those funds. Rodriguez looked defeated. What exactly are you asking for? Full repayment of all loans with interest, Patricia said. Reimbursement for the unauthorized credit card charges and a formal, legally enforceable payment plan. And if they can't afford that? Patricia's smile was razor sharp. Then we'll see them in court. The negotiations dragged on for 4 hours. In the end, my children agreed to repay $55,400 total, $53,000 in loans plus $2,400 in unauthorized charges, pay 6% annual interest from the original loan dates. Commit to a 3-year payment plan with automatic paycheck deductions, cover all legal fees except that if they defaulted, I could garnish their wages or place liens on their property. As we left the law office, Margaret grabbed my arm. Mom, please, can't we work this out as a family? I looked at her with a calmness that came from finally seeing things clearly. We stopped being a family the moment you decided I was just a source of money. This is business now. That evening, I treated myself to dinner at the nicest restaurant in town. For the first time in 3 years, I ordered exactly what I wanted without checking the prices. My children had taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. Respect isn't given freely. Sometimes it has to be demanded, documented, and legally enforced, but they'd also given me something else. The motivation to stop living for others' approval and start living for myself. By May, the payments started arriving like clockwork. Margaret, $587 per month for 3 years. David, $634 per month for 3 years. Sarah, $421 per month for 3 years. Amazing how responsible they became when the money came straight out of their paychecks. Then one afternoon, while sorting through Tom's old papers, I found something unexpected, a manila envelope hidden in his desk drawer marked for Eleanor. Open after my death, inside was a letter that changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and there are things you need to know. The business account Jonna probably told you about was meant to be a surprise. For our 35th anniversary, I wanted to take you to Ireland just like we always dreamed, but there's more. I've been having symptoms I haven't shared, memory problems, confusion. I was afraid I was developing dementia like my father. I didn't want to burden you with another sick husband to care for. I told David about the account only because I feared I might forget about it. And I wanted to make sure you'd get the money someday. I never meant for him to try to access it himself. I also want you to know that I've been proud of you every day of our marriage. You're stronger than you realize, smarter than you give yourself credit for. And you deserve better than a husband who kept his fears hidden. Don't let the children take advantage of your kindness the way I sometimes did. You have my permission to be selfish for once. All my love, Tom S. There's a safety deposit box at Second National. The key is taped under your jewelry box. Happy anniversary, my love. I sat in Tom's study for nearly an hour, crying for the man I'd lost and the fears he'd carried in silence. But beneath the grief, I felt something else, relief. Tom hadn't deceived me. He'd been trying to protect me while wrestling with the terror of losing his mind. When I opened the safety deposit box, I found $15,000 in savings bonds and a small jewelry box with a note for the strong, beautiful woman who deserves better than a man who kept secrets. I drove straight to the bank and deposited the bonds. Then I did something I hadn't done in 15 years. I went shopping for myself. New clothes, new shoes, even a proper haircut at an expensive salon that evening. I called each of my children. I found your father's letter, I told them. I understand now why David knew about the account. But that doesn't excuse trying to access it behind my back. Margaret was the first to respond. Moms, we didn't know about Dad's health fears. He never said anything to us. Your father was a proud man, I said softly. He didn't want to worry anyone. But that's not an excuse for how you've treated me since he died. Sarah's voice cracked. We're sorry, and for the first time, she actually sounded like she meant it. Sorry doesn't give me back 3 years of being treated like an ATM, I said. My voice calm but firm. But it's a start. David cleared his throat. Mom, when the payments are done, do you think we can try to rebuild our relationship? I thought about that for a long moment. Maybe, but it'll be a different kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect, not obligation or convenience. We understand, Margaret said quietly. I hope you do, I told them. Because the woman who wrote checks just to keep the peace? She's gone. You're going to have to earn your way back into my life. After I hung up, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine and watched the sunset. For the first time since Tom died, I felt like myself again, strong, independent, and finally free. 2 years later, I was sitting in my cozy apartment at a lovely senior community just outside Columbus, reviewing my monthly statements with quiet satisfaction. All 3 payment plans were current. In fact, David had even finished paying me back 2 months early. My phone rang. It was Margaret. Mom, I just wanted to call because David told us he's done paying you back. And we wanted to ask, would you consider having dinner with us? All of us, together? I glanced out my window at the community garden. I'd planted tomatoes, herbs, and flowers I'd chosen simply because I liked them, not because they were practical. What kind of dinner are we talking about, Margaret? I asked cautiously. The kind where we pay, she said. The kind where we show up with genuine apologies and realistic expectations. The kind where we treat you like the intelligent, successful woman you are instead of an obligation we have to manage. That was perhaps the most mature thing any of my children had said to me in 5 years. When did you have in mind? Whenever you're free, she said. We know you have bridge club on Tuesdays, book group on Thursdays, and volunteer work on weekends. We can work around your schedule, I smiled. They'd been paying attention. That was progress. Saturday evening works. 7 o'clock, I said. Yes, Mom, Margaret replied softly. I'll choose the restaurant. The dinner wasn't some magical, movie-worthy reconciliation. There were no tears, no grand speeches of forgiveness, no promises that things would go back to how they used to be, but there was something better. Respect. Sarah brought photos of her new apartment, the first one she'd paid for entirely on her own. David talked about his promotion at work and how keeping up with his debt payments had taught him how to budget properly. Margaret mentioned that she and Mark had started marriage counseling to work on their communication issues. None of them asked me for anything. None of them made jokes at my expense. When the check came, they split it 3 ways and refused to let me pay a penny. Mom, David said as we walked out. I want you to know that paying you back wasn't punishment. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I learned what money actually costs. I learned what respect means, Sarah added quietly. Margaret hugged me tightly by my car. I learned that my mother is tougher than I ever gave her credit for. And I'm glad you didn't let us destroy that. As I drove home, I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago, grieving, lonely, desperate to hold on to relationships even when they hurt me. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone I actually liked, Eleanor Walsh, retired teacher, independent woman, bridge champion, and volunteer literacy coordinator. A woman who paid her own bills, chose her own friends, and demanded to be treated with dignity. My children had taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, though not the one they intended. They taught me that love without respect is worthless, that family relationships built on exploitation aren't worth preserving, and that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is stop enabling their worst behavior. Now, 6 months later, I talk to my children every few weeks. They visit occasionally. We exchange gifts on holidays, but our relationship is fundamentally different now. I'm not mom, the bank account. I'm not mom, the enabler. I'm just Eleanor, a woman they happen to be related to. A woman who will help them if they truly need it and treat them kindly if they do the same. Some people might say I was too harsh, that families should forgive and forget. But those people have never been systematically robbed by the very people they raised. My children needed to learn that actions have consequences, that respect is earned, not assumed, that their mother is a person with her own needs, her own boundaries, and her own worth. It took 3 years and a fair amount of legal paperwork, but they finally learned. And in the process, so did I. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've been through something similar, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.